first of all, thank you. Pam and I are so grateful that you're doing this for us today. So for everyone who's on this, Andrew Yang is running for mayor of New York City, and he is a lifelong New York State resident. He's also a philanthropist, an entrepreneur, an author. You've been a corporate lawyer. You've worn a lot of different hats before you got into politics, and you ran for president. And a lot of people know who you are. You're also a parent. And so we're really anxious to hear what you have to say. You have a room full of real estate professionals who are anxious to hear your message. So the floor is yours, Andrew.
Thank you, Bess. Thank you, Pam. Thank you all for being here today. Real estate is the life's blood of New York City. Like, you all are so much in touch with everything that's going on. And one thing I love about folks in your industry is that what's good for the city is good for you all. You know what I mean? Like, you just want the city to be doing well. And if the city's doing well, then you're doing well. Unfortunately for all of us, the city is not doing well right now. You know, like we all can sense that. So you may know I'm something of a numbers guy. So the numbers that you've been feeling, we're missing 84% of commuters, 60 million tourists, 70% of subway ridership, 300,000 people have left New York City, including, frankly, some very, very high taxpayers and earners and business owners, 30,000 lives, 600,000 jobs, thousands of small businesses. Like, the depletion you feel is real. And maybe one of the darkest numbers is that violent crime has risen 94% or so year over year. So those are the numbers. And you all represent the folks who live here and are trying to move here or trying to sell properties that are in most cases worth millions and millions of dollars. And people are trying to figure out what is the market value of a property that was worth a certain amount pre-COVID. And the liquidity is lower because there's just less transacting going on. And so there's a lot of waiting and seeing in terms of what the recovery will look like. So that's the picture we're in right now. That's why you all feel the way you do. Now, I've got some good news. I know it's going to be tough to imagine there's good news after that litany of terrifying statistics. But here's some good news. So thanks to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and the feds, New York State is getting $60 billion in federal relief, $6 billion directly into the municipal budget. Another $15 billion, not all of it, but some of it's going to go to reopening Broadway through the Save Our Stages Act. So Broadway is going to reopen probably September of this year, despite the fact that natively it's not going to, you know, obviously you're not going to be like seeing full houses and whatnot, but Broadway is going to reopen nonetheless. And Broadway alone drew 14 million tourists pre-COVID, supported 100,000 jobs or so. So that's very significant. One of the things that I said to folks is that, like it or not, the government's going to be a really big part of both the recovery and our economy for the foreseeable, but we're getting tens of billions of dollars in direct aid. And there will probably be an additional infrastructure bill that's going to send an additional, in my mind, like X billions of dollars straight to New York City. So we have a 1 to 2 year runway of federal funding that's going to help us get out of this period. So hopefully that sounds very positive. The other positive is that I've talked now to several either billionaires or people who are, actually they were all billionaires now I think about it. And they say that they are waiting to invest in New York City, but they want to very, very badly. And it's going to depend upon who wins this mayoral race. And that blew me away. But then I realized that there are certain people who are in this race that frankly are somewhat anti-business and anti-growth and anti-development. They're much more political in their approach. And so I realized that these titans that were waiting to see who won this race actually were being smart. But they genuinely said to me, if this race goes well, I am going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars, $1 billion or more. All three of them actually use the term $1 billion. So these three individuals were all like, I'm going to invest $1 billion in New York City if there's a mayor I can work with. So you have the feds investing billions of dollars, and then you have major New York City leaders, CEOs, philanthropists who are all worth, frankly, in these three individuals' cases, like multiple billions of dollars. And they all said that they were going to invest $1 billion if there was a mayor they could work with. So there's a ton of potential energy that's kind of waiting and seeing with this race. And then the third thing is that the catalyst for the recovery of both commuters and tourists is the vaccine. And I have, just like you all, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I've had this experience. I have meetings every day, and more of those meetings have been with people that frankly seemed like they'd never heard of COVID. And then so I would sit with them and I'd be like, you seem very like laissez-faire. And then they'd be like, oh, I was vaccinated. And it turns out that after you've been vaccinated, you all of a sudden became very, very free and easy about COVID, which makes sense. It's human nature. Like, I think that there are guidelines where you're supposed to act the same, and when no one's acting the same. Like after they get vaccinated, they're just so chill about COVID. And I'm going to suggest to you all that that's actually a very, very positive sign because as more people get vaccinated, they're going to feel safer to go back to the office. They're going to feel safer to go out and meet with their friends. There's just a lot of pent up energy. And that energy is in the form of capital, in the form of some organizations, but it's also in the form of wanting to go out, spend time with other people, spend money, have experiences, come to a place like New York City. And so I think there is a chance that we experience the analog to the Roaring 20s that came in the wake of the Spanish flu of 1918, and then 1920s were like the Roaring 20s and Great Gatsby and the rest of it. There is a chance that starting next year, we are in our own version of the Roaring 20s. And if that happens, then you might see New York City come back more quickly than anyone thinks. So I've given you the bad news. I've given you some of the good news. The goal is for us to try and make the good news real as quickly as possible. I will suggest to you all that that politics has not been helping us recover. It may hold us back. The main goal, I think, of the next mayor should be to try and accelerate our recovery in any way possible. And that's going to include activating the philanthropic sector, the private sector, and even the technology sector to try and speed us up. So that's a bit about my perspective on what's coming for New York City. Would certainly love to take questions from you all and get to know you a bit better. But there's a lot of cause for optimism if we just get this election right.
Thank you, Andrew. That's, I share your optimism. I know Pam will have a question. I have a question for you. And then we can get to Pam and maybe some agents is, regarding safety. I mean, the vaccine is one thing, but one of the, the biggest, most important issues we face today has been safety. And New York City, had a lot of issues. You talked about violent crime being up. How do you plan to work with the police department and with the citizens and to make sure that we're united and we work together and not have this sort of divisive narrative that's been in the media?
If you talk to New York City voters, which I do every day, you find that public safety and rising crime are top of mind for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, yellow, brown, like everyone is concerned about being able to walk the streets at night safely. So if you look at the numbers, you find that crime is up 94%, violent crime, which is terrible. You also find that clearance rates, which are the rates at which the perpetrators of the crimes are being caught, or the crime is being resolved, are declining. They're down 16% in the same time period. So you look at that and say, why is that? And when you talk to folks in the NYPD, they say that the department is very demoralized. They're getting out of their vehicles less. They're doing active community policing less, in large part because they have a non-existent / dysfunctional relationship with the current mayor. And what I'm hearing is that the NYPD is doing something like of a muted slowdown, kind of waiting for this administration to end. I mean, this is not good news, but this is what I'm being told, and it's being borne out by the facts, frankly. So the next mayor needs to go to the NYPD and say, look, we need you. We need the police. We need you to help catch the perpetrators of these crimes and help make our streets safer. There is no recovery without this sense of security that New Yorkers have felt to be in question this past number of months. So step number one is to frankly just build up the morale of the NYPD. Let them know, look, if you do your job professionally, you have nothing to worry about. Like that, there's not going to be a political atmosphere where you get thrown under the bus because of a bad social media video or snippet. You know, like you have to be able to do your job. I have a proposal that people now seem to like a lot, which is that new police officers should live in New York City, which is something that we already require for employees of other agencies that are frankly not as important as the NYPD. And so if you can imagine hundreds of new police officers living in New York City, not only would that build a different type of connection between them and the community, because they're, you know, they're serving and protecting in some cases like folks that they might encounter in their own lives, but they'd also be commuting to work within the city, and they'd be walking around off duty in the cities. You'd have hundreds of off-duty police officers just like walking around New York City instead of, frankly, New Jersey or Long Island, which is where a lot of them live right now. The third thing that I've proposed, and I just had a very promising meeting about this morning, is that I have pledged to reduce street homelessness by more than 50% in my first term. And this is a human issue, it's an economic issue and a recovery issue. At the margins, though, it is a public safety issue, because every once in a while, like most homeless people are harmless, but every once in a while, one will do something that winds up in the newspapers in a very negative way. And so we can reduce street homelessness by more than 50% if we invest in safe haven beds and mental health resources and supportive housing and other things, and have a different standard of intervention and care, because right now, too often, someone's just on the street, you know, indefinitely. I talked to someone today who's been on the street for 19 months. I mean, I just find that crazy. He's having health problems. I mean, as you'd imagine, after being on the street that long. So those are the things that we can do to try and renew our sense of security, stability, and public safety. When I hear the term police accountability, what I think is accountable for getting crime rates down. You know, I mean, that's your job. You know, if crime is rising in your area, then that has to be something that we respond to. And that's the way we should be tying their performance and compensation increases.
Excellent. Great answer, Andrew. Thank you. Pam, do you have a question?
Sure. So, Andrew, there's a real dichotomy that exists now between the, let's just call it a progressive agenda and the agenda of higher earners in New York City and New York State. And we've been hearing, and you've even alluded to the fact that many millionaires, billionaires are being sort of vilified in this city, and we're faced with all these extra taxes. So two-part question here. One is, how do you bring people together so that the city council, which will be turnover quite a bit in the next year or two, is I think going to be framed in one way, and look at the real estate community and the wealthier people in New York in a certain way, and then deal with the issues that we have in the city where we have a terrible problem with affordable housing. And as we saw during this pandemic, and I think someone brought up, kids who were unable to attend school, they weren't even able to eat 3 solid meals a day. So it's a difficult time in the city, the haves, the have-nots. How do you bring everyone together? And what are you thinking about for affordable housing to start?
Thank you, Pam. I think you've hit the nail on the head, where right now there is a political element that has a very divisive approach, where what they do is they turn to folks and say, look, we're hurting, so let's ask more of the people at the top. Now, I think that there are very successful people in New York who frankly can pay more, but we have to be realistic about the fact that some people are voting with their feet and leaving New York City, in part because the tax difference between New York City and Florida is already 13%. and there are limits to what you can do, where sometimes like it's not going to actually meet your intended goal. I'm one of the only candidates in this race that has been on the record saying that turning away Amazon and its 26,000 high-paying jobs was a mistake for the city. Not just because of the direct economic activity that it would have generated in Long Island City and you know, frankly, the entire city, but because it sent a very strong anti-business message where people looked up and said, wow, this seems like New York City like doesn't seem to value employers. I've talked to a lot of leaders in the business community who said like, build a Blasio has literally like not called any of us in 8 years, you know, like that. And so being explicitly pro-business, pro-growth, pro-development, which I am, I think is a huge necessary tone switch to let folks know that New York City needs its companies, it needs its successful people. Like, we're not vilifying or demonizing anyone for their degree of success. Heck, half the reason a lot of people came to New York City was to try and become successful themselves, like become like these folks. But the other side of it, what you just said is also right, is that there's a massive affordability crisis in housing. There are a lot of New Yorkers who right now are suffering from food insecurity, like whatever the basics are, it's actually in question. Anna has, asking about education, and 29% of New Yorkers don't have high-speed internet at home. So this entire remote education that we've been talking about hasn't even been accessible to a lot of the poorest New Yorkers. So this should be a unifying message where we say, look, like, our job is to try and get our city back on its feet as quickly as possible and help the people in need. And we're going to need everyone to do that. And that certainly includes people who are frankly like very successful and have resources. I think I'm the best, maybe even unique figure in this way, in that if you go to New Yorkers who are struggling, they sense that I'm on their side, in part because I ran for president on a platform trying to give them money. so they like generally think it's like, oh, Yang's trying to help me, which I am. But at the same time, like, I have many friends in the business community who are very successful and are CEOs and entrepreneurs. And we have to make the case that New York City is the place for them too. Because without them, it's going to be next to impossible to restart the engine of our economy and then grow and invest.
Great.
So true.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me, Andrew, I want to get to some questions. Okay. Here's a question. Our students have lost up to a year of learning capacity. How specifically will you work with Chancellor Porter to address these educational, emotional, and nutritional issues?
Yeah, I'm the parent, and I was talking to Bess and Pam about this. I've got an 8 and 5-year-old. I've got 8 and 5-year-old boys. The 8-year-old's autistic and in a special needs school. The 5-year-old's in kindergarten, and the data shows that remote learning is 30 to 70% less effective than in-person instruction. So we should not have any illusions. Our kids have lost a lot, and it's not just a year of learning. As this question suggests, there are real emotional issues and even trauma that have come for many of these children, because for many of them, school was frankly a better, safer environment than their home life. We've seen domestic violence surge, even that's been reported, and a lot of it's been unreported. So we have to expect that our children will need mental health resources and social workers when they return to school. We should be offering summer school this summer, not to be a Grinch or whatnot, but there's a lot of time to make up. We should have extended hours, and I've asked for 10,000 AmeriCorps tutors to try and tutor 100,000 kids who are suffering from learning loss, because it's that kind of high dose tutoring that's going to be necessary to help some of these kids catch up. So this time, unfortunately, has been the worst for the kids that could afford it least, who tend to be Black and brown, poorer students that have lost more than just a year of learning. Like they've lost a year of development, both socially and emotionally.
Thank you. Okay, there's a question. All right, here's a question, and I think you should just clarify this. Someone is asking, how is it okay for police to stop policing because they feel demoralized? I don't think that's, you were saying it's okay, but maybe you want to.
Of course, I'm not saying it's okay. I mean, it's terrible.
Right.
And we're all suffering from it in some way. I mean, certainly there's less confidence in New York City because you do see the rising crime rates. I'm just reporting what people in the NYPD tell me is happening. And one behavior I'll use as just like an illustration is that if you're a police officer and you drive up to a scene, you have a choice to get out of your vehicle or not get out of your vehicle. And from what I'm hearing anecdotally, just they're getting out of their vehicles less. And so they're just having less interactions with people. One of the things that I would like to change as mayor is to try and have measurements around things like just community interactions and engagements. to frankly reward police officers who have more conversations. Because the easy thing to do is just stay in your vehicle, but that doesn't make us any safer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you would support criminal justice reform, removing cops that are, are doing the wrong things and that are bad actors. But we also don't want to dehumanize the cops that are trying to do a good job. We want to keep them, incentivized to keep working. So it's a balance.
It is a balance. I mean, there's a real need for reform for certain elements of the NYPD, but at the same time, you need police to police. And so it is a situation where you need to do at least two things at once.
It's a challenge. I was here throughout the pandemic and there was a lot of things going on and nobody was around to do anything. I mean, I saw things that I couldn't believe and nobody stopped it. So we definitely need to work together. Okay, let me get you
Can I
another.
pop in on another question on education? How do you feel about charter schools, which our current mayor has really not been a fan of, and also testing to get into the specialized schools? Are you in favor or opposed?
There was like a piece that criticized me for donating to a charter school. I guess that gives you a sense of where I am, Pam. I'm just for any school that's working for our kids. There are public schools that are delivering for families. There are charter schools that are delivering for families. We should just be trying to reward and reinforce and build on any successful school. I do think that charters get a bad rap because of the politics, where there are certain folks that are against them because they think it's bad for certain interest groups or certain unions. I am for keeping the SHSAT, but incorporating it into a larger set of factors like grades, recommendations, essays, interviews, and I'm for expanding the capacity. There's no reason to limit ourselves in terms of selective high schools. I'm for opening 2 new selective high schools per borough, because one thing that's happening right now is that kids are commuting more than an hour each way to get to high school. Which I'm going to suggest is probably not ideal for their learning or their schedules. So again, why limit ourselves? I'm going to say something that actually is going to put in stark relief, like the situation we're in. I'm told that our school system has shrunk from 1.1 million students to 900,000 students because 200,000 kids have left the system. This past year, we'll get some of them back. Some of them are just gone temporarily. But that is in some ways an opportunity for us to make overdue changes, which should include opening new selective high schools, because the demand is so massive. So why constrict the supply? Like if it was your business, you'd be like, let's let's get some more seats. And so there's no reason not to in this instance.
Bess, just one other quick question I wanted to ask, because a few people have texted it to me. How do you feel about bail reform that's been happening?
Well, this is so I am for criminal justice reform in the sense that there are a lot of our systems that right now that criminalize poverty. And there are a lot of things that have, frankly, as soon as you run afoul of it, if you don't have money, like you wind up in some cases in jail because you're unable to pay fines or get out. And I'm going to say that like the level of expense associated with keeping someone in jail in New York City would blow your minds. Like you wouldn't even believe me if I told you. I'm going to tell you, then you can tell me if you believe it. We're spending over $300,000 per prisoner per year in New York City on Rikers. $300,000 per prisoner per year. So anything that helps you avoid that expense, it's in some ways is a huge win. That said, I think there are issues around folks that may present, frankly, a threat of recidivism that right now are being released that in another time would be held. And so I believe in bail reform, but I do think that we should have discretion to hold people if we think that they're going to do something else.
If they have a violent past, for example, or prior or something like that.
Yeah, violent past, or that they present as having some mental health challenges right now, or it's like right now there is a sense that we have to find the right balance. We don't want to criminalize poverty, but we also want our system to help frankly get people the resources that they need, so that if they are introduced into society, that they're not going to be a threat to themselves or other people.
Andrew, have you heard, I'm sure you have, about the pied-à-terre tax that's been proposed?
Yes, I have heard of it.
And what is your position on it?
So I know this one's going to be unpopular, but I think it is something that we have to consider. Like there is going to be a need for revenue. And of the proposals I've seen, that one is like is more sensible approach than some of the others I've seen.
Can I just share with you that we've actually studied it, or we've had economists study it, and it actually loses money for New York City, and it would be a deterrent for people to invest here and buy here and build here. I mean, we should have a bigger conversation about it, but we think it would really hurt the city in such a tremendous way.
Well, Bess, I'm someone that is very responsive to data. And so if a policy is not going to achieve its stated goal, then I would re-examine.
Good, because I want to share that with you, because I think that the pied-à-terre tax has been based in politics, not economics. And we want tax policy based in economics. And I think if I shared with you the information from Martha Stark, who used to work with Bloomberg, you would say you would revisit it. I guarantee you.
Yeah, I'm open to that. I mean, it was one reason why, for example, on the presidential, I came out against the wealth tax, which I think on a state level makes zero sense. But even on a national level, I didn't like it because of the experience that that various other places had had. So I'm very open to data that shows that a policy might not achieve its goals.
Good, great. I'm going to share that with you. I think we have time for one more question, Andrew, before we let you go. We have so many questions, but I don't know, Pam, if you have another one. If not, I'll go look.
How do you feel about the decriminalization of drugs in New York?
I'm certainly for the decriminalization of cannabis and marijuana, and I think that could be a very significant business opportunity, happily. I think the war on drugs has been a war on people for the most part. It has not worked. And so I'm for decriminalization of a variety of substances that, frankly, someone's an addict to, or it's for consumption purposes. If someone is trafficking, then that's a different story. But if someone is an addict, in some cases, frankly, our society has encouraged addiction. It's like opiates, like, gosh, I mean, we like freaking, allowed Purdue to spend billions of turning a lot of people into addicts. So I'm for decriminalizing addiction and substance use in that vein, and then going after the true criminals, which are like the traffickers and people that are inducing others.
Great. Let's see. Andrew, we're going to squeeze in one more question.
Sure. I'm trying to answer questions on the chat too. I'm like trying to multitask.
What do you plan to do about lowering real estate taxes? And we asked you that. Okay. There's a lot. Oh, here's one. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. Apologize. Oh, this is a long one. That's too long. I'm not going to get through it. So Andrew, as Pam had mentioned, one of the issues that New York has faced, I think, in the last decade is there's been no sort of moderate voice in New York City. It's been this stream, like the democratic socialist agenda has taken over, so to speak, and it's been very challenging. And so I guess my question to you would be, how do you plan to work with, the extreme left and sort of keep New York in balance so that we don't have egregious taxes and we keep, crime down and those sorts of things?
Right now, nothing's going to work if New York City's economy does not get revived and restored. And that's the argument I'm going to make to everyone. It's like, look, you have political priorities. It's not going to be possible to meet your priority if we don't get these jobs back, these tourists back, the commuters back. New York City is a place-based economy. It's what you all do. Zoom is not our friend. So we have to be making this argument that there is no better environment to build a world-class organization than right here in New York City. And I've lived that. I showed up here as a 21-year-old student who didn't know anything. And so the goal is to get even very, very, frankly, like left-leaning folks on board with the fact that if we don't get the city going, then it's not going to work. And I believe that I'm the person who can unify New Yorkers around this message. I would love your support. You probably know this, but if you donate to any mayoral campaign and you're a New York City resident, it gets matched 8-1. Imagine if anyone told you that you get like 9x return. So would love your help getting the city back on its feet. And I want you all to be able to do what you do in the same way that you've always done it, knowing that the value of New York City real estate will continue to go up and up. And that's a vision that we can fight for.
Great. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time. And we really appreciate it. And we look forward to talking to you further.
Yes, thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bess. Thank you, Pam. Hello, my friend Shaun Donovan. I see that you're next on the mayoral candidate parade. I will see you soon.
Big elbow bump, Andrew.
Bye, Shaun. Bye, everyone.
Welcome, Shaun.
Hi,
And
Shaun.
handing it over to you.
Shaun, thank you so much for joining us today. We have an illustrious group of New York City residents here who are anxious to hear what our next possible mayor might have to say. So many challenges facing New York today. So we consider your time here to be very valuable. We thank you for doing it. Just as a short way of introduction, Shaun's a native New Yorker. He served as HUD secretary from 2009 to 2014 and as director of the Office of Management and Budget from 2014 until Barack Obama left office in 2017. Prior to that, he was Deputy Assistant HUD Secretary under Bill Clinton and as Commissioner of the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development under Mike Bloomberg. I believe a graduate of Harvard University. He has spent his life serving the people. So thank you for joining us here, Shaun. We'd love to hear what you have to say and then hopefully have some time for Q&A with our folks here.
Pam, thank you. It's so great to see you again. I really, really appreciate the invitation. Bess, thank you as well. And as you said, lots of great New Yorkers out there, including a number of whom made it possible for me to raise my family in New York because I bought homes through your brokers multiple times. So thank you. You know who you are out there. Thank you. And to all of you for joining. So I hope you leave this half hour believing that I'm the right person to be mayor for 3 reasons. First, no one in this campaign, no one in this city has led through crisis again and again from housing to hurricanes in the way that I have. Second, I have the biggest, boldest ideas for the future of this city. I'm literally the man with the plan. And third, because I have the experience at all 3 levels of government to turn that plan you just saw into reality. But I want to start by telling you a little something about what you didn't hear in my resume that really goes to why I love this city so passionately. And that story begins with my grandfather, who was one of 10 poor Irish kids who grew up on the south side of London. To make a living, literally as a teenager, he got on a boat alone to go to West Africa and then to South America. My dad grew up in Costa Rica and Lima, Peru. And he came to this country like so many immigrants to get an education. And he came to New York because it was a city of the future. It was a city of opportunity. He's what you would call a tech entrepreneur before those words even existed. He had enough money to buy stationery to mail to his first few customers. And he spent 60 years in this city building a company and giving me, my entire family, the opportunity that he had dreamed of as a kid growing up in Lima. But I saw a very different city around me growing up as well. I saw homelessness exploding on our streets. I saw the South Bronx literally burning to the ground. And it lit a fire in me to go to work on behalf of this city that I love. And so started volunteering in a homeless shelter at Harvard, as you heard. I came back right after I finished school and went to work for a public-private partnership that was rebuilding those same neighborhoods I'd seen burning as a kid. And that began a 30-year career on the front lines of housing and homelessness, of economic development and public service that taught me what it means to lead through crisis. And I'll tell you, I try not to take it personally, like somehow crisis seems to follow me wherever I go in public service. But I was housing commissioner for Mike Bloomberg, as you heard, in the wake of 9/11. When the worst housing crisis of our lifetimes hit this city and this country, no one knows that and remembers it more than you do. President Obama asked me to lead the entire federal effort to rebuild our housing market and our economy. When Sandy hit our shores and my friends and neighbors in Brooklyn lost their homes, their businesses, a friend even lost his daughter in the storm, President Obama asked me to lead the entire federal recovery effort. And I guess because no good deed goes unpunished, he then asked me to lead the $4 trillion federal budget. And just 3 weeks later, Ebola hit. And I ended up side by side with Dr. Fauci, all our military leaders in the Situation Room at the White House, with President Obama, with then Vice President, now President Biden. We worked side by side to make sure that Ebola and then Zika were emerging global health threats that didn't become pandemics that cost tens of thousands of New Yorkers their lives. So no one knows what it means to lead through crisis in the way that I do. And no one is better prepared to hit the ground running when January comes next year. This is not the time for a rookie as mayor. This is not the time for on-the-job training. We need someone who is ready on day one to lead this city back. To lead this city back, we need to do three things: repair, rebuild, and reimagine this city. What do I mean by repair our city? Well, for me, it begins with repairing our civic fabric. We need a mayor for all New Yorkers, not someone who's going to demonize and divide us. As you've heard, it's personal to me. I don't believe the private sector is the enemy. That's my dad you're talking about. But I would also say, I fundamentally understand that we cannot repair this city without everyone being at the table, everyone having a role in doing that. We also need to repair our quality of life. I fundamentally believe, I learned this from Mayor Bloomberg, I learned this from the best mayors across the country and across the globe who I worked side by side with. In this economy, talent decides where to live and companies and capital follow. And if you believe that as I do, then the single most important tool any mayor has is quality of life. And I don't just mean safe streets and ending homelessness, which I would do as mayor. I mean our arts and culture and restaurants. What makes this city more interesting, more fun, the place where people want to live, where talent wants to live, is everything that separates us from every other city in this country and in the world. And we should remember, even before COVID, New York City was shrinking. We had taken our eye off the ball on quality of life in a way that I would reverse as mayor. So that's what I mean by repairing our city. We need to rebuild our city as well. And that starts with making us the safest city in the world, ensuring that every New Yorker, when they walk into a restaurant, when they go to a show, they know that they are safe, can check on their phone. When a tourist lands at Kennedy or LaGuardia or Newark, that they can check their phone and begin the process of understanding that this is the safest city in the world. But we shouldn't wait for them to land. I would work with NYC and Company and our artists, our performers, to make sure that everyone in the world knows that before they ever come to New York. Because Lord knows, I'm glad to be with you on this Zoom, but I also know we are all looking forward to getting off Zoom, getting back into our restaurants, getting back into our theaters and museums, all of the things that make New York City a unique city in the world have to come back. And as mayor, I fundamentally understand that arts and culture and restaurants aren't elite. They are central to who we are as a city and as New Yorkers. So that's what I mean by repair. But we also need to rebuild our city in other ways as well. I have a plan to create 500,000 jobs that would once again make New York City the city of the future. We have all of the raw material to be the leading public health and biotech city in the world, but we haven't brought that together. I would create a new life sciences center in Upper Manhattan, in the Bronx. Across this city, I would take Floyd Bennett Field and turn it into an innovation zone for drones, for driverless vehicles, for all of the things that will make the economy of the future in the city. We should be a leader in all of those things again. But let's be clear, if we're really going to rebuild our health and our economy, it's going to take a mayor who understands how to go to Washington, D.C. and get the help that we deserve, to get the vaccines that we need. We were the hardest hit city in the world a year ago. We deserve and should have all the vaccines we need to make this the safest city in the world. We should get the resources out of the $1.9 trillion stimulus. And while some candidates will say they might have the president's phone number, no one has worked side by side with President Biden, with Vice President Harris, and with nearly every single senior official in the Biden administration who are not just colleagues, but friends. This past year, I've been called on again and again by Congress to make sure that we are getting the resources to this city. I worked with leaders on both sides of the aisle on these last two stimulus packages from Washington to make sure that we invested in our subways, that we got housing assistance, we got food to people who needed it, we got unemployment insurance, including to our actors and actresses, our gig workers. All of those are things I know because I led the $4 trillion budget. I know where the bodies are buried in Washington and how to get us the help that we need. We're going to need that in the next mayor. You know this. We send as New Yorkers $23 billion more to Washington each year than we get back in return. And then the salt deduction was just sort of pouring salt into a wound. We need a mayor who can reverse all of that and finally get the help that New York deserves in our time of need. No one is better positioned to do that. And frankly, no one is better positioned or understands better that we can't regulate and tax our way to recovery. I led the $4 trillion federal budget, and folks forget, after 4 years of Trump, it's hard to remember that President Obama inherited the worst budget deficit since World War II. And by the time I finished as budget director, we had reduced that deficit faster than any time since World War II, while still investing in jobs, in transportation, in healthcare, in all of the critical things like housing that we need in this city right now. So no one has the experience that I do in getting our fiscal house in order as well. All of those are going to be absolutely central to our recovery. So that's what we need to do to repair and rebuild this city, and to make sure that we do it while welcoming business, while welcoming people to this city, rather than taxing them and chasing them away. And I would make government actually work for New Yorkers, make it more efficient, reduce the cost of services, bring technology, all of the things that I've done again and again in my career. But the last thing I want to say is something that President Obama used to say to us in moments of crisis. We cannot let a crisis go to waste. And what I mean by that is we can't just repair and rebuild our city. We have to reimagine it as a city that works for everyone. For me, given that I started volunteering in a homeless shelter in college decades ago, that means we need to end homelessness in this city. We need to reimagine our right to shelter as a right to housing. And I'm the only candidate in this race that has actually done that. I led the strategy for President Obama that dramatically reduced homelessness around this country. Thanks to a big hand from Michelle Obama, we challenged mayors around this country, and in more than 80 cities and states, we ended veteran homelessness, not reduced it, but ended it. And that begins with understanding that you can't solve homelessness with homeless programs. It isn't just a problem of shelter. It's a problem of mental health and substance abuse and all these other things. And guess what? If we prioritized housing with services, we could make the lives of people sleeping on our streets and in shelters dramatically better. We could save lives, but we could also save money as well. We're wasting $3 billion a year right now putting a giant Band-Aid on the problem. Instead, if we reimagined our right to shelter as a right to housing, we could end homelessness and reduce the cost. How can that be, you might ask? Well, guess what? Folks who sleep on our streets, where do they get their health care? In our emergency rooms. They cycle in and out of expensive institutional places like the mental health wings of our public hospitals, Rikers. Think about this. We spend more than $400,000 per prisoner per year at Rikers right now, and we get bad results. We can reimagine that system to actually break the cycle of incarceration, end homelessness, and make sure that quality of life on our streets in our city is dramatically better. We can also reimagine this as a city that leads on climate change. We did that under Mike Bloomberg. We were a leader in the world. New Yorkers are hungry to lead the world again in so many areas: climate, public health, and so many others. As mayor, I would do that. And I'm the only candidate that has the experience in crisis, the big, bold ideas, and the understanding of government to actually get it done. So let me end with this, Pam. I want to go back to my father's story that I started with. When I was nominated to President Obama's cabinet, my father came to me and he said, "Shaun, I'm ready. After more than 50 years of having a green card, I want to become a citizen, but I have one condition: that President Obama or you swears me in." And I said, "Dad, I would love nothing more than to do that. But even the president doesn't have the authority to swear you in. That would be illegal. But 5 summers ago, I got to be the keynote speaker in my father's citizenship ceremony in the Great Hall on Ellis Island. It is a moment I will remember every day for the rest of my life. Every child growing up, whether in Lima, Peru, who dreams of being a tech entrepreneur someday, or on the Lower East Side, growing up in Stapleton on Staten Island, or in the South Bronx, every child, no matter what language they speak, the color of their skin, who they love, who they worship, should believe that this is a city of the future for them, that this is a city of opportunity. That's the city that we can build together. I would love your support and help to get there. Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Shaun. Touched on so many vital issues and a lot of questions, but let me just start with this. Quality of life is the first thing you touched on. What are the biggest things that you would change to improve the quality of life right away in New York? Because we are suffering.
Absolutely, Pam. And look, I know what the alternative looks like. As I said, my childhood was the childhood of the 70s and 80s in this city. And look, we do need to get policing straight in this city. We do need accountability. We do need to weed out the bad apples, but we also need to get violent crime under control. We need to stop the flow of guns into this city. And my plan recognizes that I believe right now we are asking the police to do far too many things in our city, whether it's patrol the hallways of our schools or be mental health experts with the homeless. I was even visiting an open street up in the Bronx the other day. These are the streets we've closed off to try to give folks more place to walk and kids to play. 75% of those open streets are the responsibility of police to oversee, when that means, what are they doing? They're putting up barricades, getting into fights with motorists, when instead we need to reduce what we're asking of them there and really focus the police on guns and violent crime. And we need a mayor who can go to Washington. I know Merrick Garland personally, worked with him. Almost all the senior officials in the Justice Department are close friends. We need a mayor who can get the partnership we need to stop the flow of guns into this city. We're not manufacturing guns in Brooklyn and the Bronx. They're coming from Virginia and other states. We need to stop that pipeline. So there are many things I think we have to do on safety that are critical. A second thing I would say is, Pam, we've got to get our restaurants open again. We've got to get arts and culture going. We've got to get tourism jump-started. We've got to get New Yorkers back in New York. And it goes to what I said. I have I'm not going to give you all of the details of it here. Again, I would say go to my website, Shaun for NYC. I am the man with the plan. And look at what we're proposing as our safest city commitment, to make this the safest city in the world, and to work with NYC and company to make sure the world knows that we're safe and folks start coming back, whether they live here or they're just visiting.
I'm going to see if Bess has a question, but one more question for me here for a second. A lot of people are focused on infrastructure, and our streets aren't well paved, our bridges are falling apart. This is obviously a great opportunity to create jobs, but do you have an infrastructure plan? What's your ideas around fixing physically our city?
Yeah. Well, Pam, first of all, not only do I have an infrastructure plan, I'm the only candidate who worked with then candidate Biden, now President Biden, on his infrastructure plan. And I'm the only one who really knows how to work with the administration. Pete Buttigieg, Polly Trottenberg, who's going to be the Deputy Transportation Secretary, all of them, to make sure that we get a federal package passed. That's going to be the single most important thing for this country and for New York City, is if we can get the big infrastructure bill passed, and then to make sure that we get our fair share of that money for New York. So that's one. Second, I'm also the only candidate who's worked to find innovative ways to fund infrastructure beyond the federal government. What do I mean? Most folks don't know this. The number 7 subway extension to the far west side was 100% funded by city revenues that we came up with innovative ways of using development, what I call value capture from new development, that can go to build parks. We built the High Line this way. We built the number 7 extension. We need a mayor who really understands how to get local funding as well and not have to wait for the MTA. But on the MTA, the third thing I would do is go to the state legislature and make a bargain to say, I'm willing to put more skin in the game, value capture, revenues from congestion pricing, but in exchange, I get more say in the infrastructure projects that the MTA is going to put forward. More seats on the board and more power to actually decide what priorities are important to New Yorkers. And I think that would be critical as well. The last thing I would say though, Pam, those are the ways to fund it. Let me talk about a few priorities. First of all, transportation is the lifeblood of this city. And we are operating a 21st century city with a 20th century transportation system. And so I would invest not only in our subways, I would create the biggest advance in bus rapid transit that this city has ever seen. And I don't mean the 14th Street slow bus rapid transit. I mean rapid transit, which, look, let me be the wonk here for a second. I know I'm the only candidate who's actually been to Curitiba, Brazil, which has the best bus rapid transit system in the world. I've sat side by side with the mayor there, who used to be an architect like me. I understand that you have to really remake your streets, put elevated platforms. And the key is the bus driver has to be able to know that they're never going to wait at a red light because they have a coordinated system lined up with the signaling to allow that bus to move rapidly. That's the single best thing we could do to reach our transit deserts around this city and revolutionize transit. Not to mention all of the micro-mobility modes. I know from working with Mike Bloomberg and his innovation effort around with cities around the country, we have smaller cities than New York that are experimenting with driverless on-demand microtransit. How can it be that we're letting Indianapolis get ahead of New York City on innovations in transportation? All of those are possible here. And we need universal broadband and a range of other things as well. Gateway Tunnel is one we shouldn't forget as well. Huge importance to create demand for folks to be coming back into the city again for work.
Great. Bess, you must have some questions.
Yes. Well, Shaun, I just have to say that, so impressive, your relationships, your depth. I mean, I thought you're really an impressive candidate. So thank you so much for sharing with us. My question to you is 2 parts. One is, how do you plan to work with, state lawmakers so that we can kind of work together? There seems to be this divide where, it's this politics, it's Twitter, it's all this crazy stuff and this narrative that's kind of not getting us anywhere. That's one question, is how do you plan to work with them? And the second question is, where do you stand on the pied-à-terre tax?
Against. I'll just start there.
Love you, Shaun. Thank you.
Look, and this goes to your first question too. I don't need training wheels to go to Albany. I actually went to Albany and got reforms. You all know that our property tax system is about the most archaic, untransparent, confusing system exists. I went to Albany and negotiated reforms to our property tax system, at least on the affordable housing side, that made it better. That's what we need to focus on, fix our property tax system, not a headline grabbing, tweetable tax that isn't going to solve our fiscal problems and in fact is going to make them worse by sending people away. So that's my position on that. On the bigger question, I would just say again, other candidates talk the talk. I've walked the walk on this, and I'll just tell you one story, Bess. I was standing at City Hall a few weeks after Sandy hit New York, and I was working away with Mayor Bloomberg was still in office at the time. I had gained through Katrina. Most people don't know this. The HUD secretary has a deep engagement, probably the second most important cabinet official for recovery from natural disasters after Homeland Security, which has FEMA in it. And so I was here working away, and I got a call on my cell phone from President Obama. And he said, Shaun, I have this idea. I want to create a task force for recovery from Sandy that will coordinate the entire federal government. And I want you to lead it. And we talked through it. And then I said to him, so let me get this straight, Mr. President. You want me to coordinate between Andrew Cuomo, Bill de Blasio, who was coming in as mayor, Mike Bloomberg, and Chris Christie. You want me to make them all work together well. Is that what you're telling me? And he said, yes, Shaun, that's what I'm telling you. And you're going to be fine. You speak New York. And guess what?
Wow.
I was fine. I was able to work really effectively with, and we all know this, some complicated personalities in there. And we got big things done. And in fact, we got $60 billion. We put it to work quickly. And we also did innovative things. I studied architecture. I brought the best architects and designers, landscape architects, scientists from around the world, created a $1 billion competition called Rebuild by Design that reimagined what our shorefronts could be, how to live with climate change. It was so successful, it's now being replicated all around the world by the Rockefeller Foundation. And so those are the kinds of innovative solutions. I like to say often, most people think of public service as the art of the possible. I like to think about it as the art of the nearly impossible. And that's what I want to do as mayor.
Thank you, Shaun. That was a wonderful answer. I'll give it back to Pam.
So simple question. We talked a lot about New York City getting around, bus lanes. How do you feel about bike lanes?
Well, there we go. That's my scar from two broken bones in my hand. Look, I learned to ride a bike on the streets of Manhattan. I'm a real New Yorker because I still have friends who not only don't have driver's licenses, they don't even know how to ride bikes, right? Only in Manhattan. But here's the thing. I think bikes need to be a big part of the solution. The problem is, and it's not just bikes, it's now e-bikes, it's these scooters. I have two boys that are 21 and 19. You know, they ride this stuff too. The electric scooters, electric skateboards. These things are moving at 30 miles an hour, right? And as a pedestrian, even though I'm a biker, I'm scared in a way that I haven't been in my lifetime in New York. And this goes back to the fundamental point I talked about before, Pam. We are operating a 21st century city with 20th century streets. And we learned that we could reinvent our streets really quickly. They've become restaurants, right? In just a few weeks' time. But the problem is we didn't have a real plan. And I'm unique in this race. As I said earlier, I've worked with mayors across the country, across the globe. There are mayors in other parts of the world who use this as a moment with less traffic on the street to really bring their streets into the 21st century. Mayor Hidalgo in Paris did that. Many others have done that. We didn't have a plan. And what I would do, take certain thoroughfares, put in bus rapid transit, dedicated lanes, create dedicated protected lanes with signaling, like they have in many other cities around the world, particularly European cities that are good on biking in these lanes, and separate them out from pedestrians in ways that we're both creating much easier commutes, safer both for the folks on the bikes and also safer for pedestrians and cars. And as we're doing that, by the way, why not fix our sanitation system? How many cities do you know in the world that still have overflowing garbage cans on the corners, right? Most people don't know this. On Roosevelt Island, we actually have a system of pneumatic tubes, like they have at Disney World, for God's sake, that take garbage from your building into a collection point. No rats. You never have garbage trucks on your street. You don't have to have alternate side of the street parking. all of these things are possible if you have a truly innovative mayor who could bring the city and our streets into the 21st century.
That's great. We really need to go there. We asked a question earlier. It's a hot topic in New York. So many people have students who clearly have suffered during the pandemic, just falling back on their learning, not being able to eat as they rely on the public schools for 3 meals a day. What's your position on working with the schools chancellor? Because we've had a very interesting ride with de Blasio and the schools. And how do you feel about charter schools and gifted and talented programs and specialized testing to enter these high schools?
So Pam, I'm going to steal a line from Barack Obama. I'm for good schools. And if you look at the facts, and I like to govern based on facts, our charter schools are actually performing on average better than our traditional public schools. So the idea that we would demonize them, especially when there's so many parents in the city, particularly Black and Latino parents who are demanding charter schools, I think it's a real mistake to fight against them. I also don't think that they're going to solve all of our challenges, right? We're never going to be an all charter system as New Orleans is or some others. So I would say, and look, maybe you've guessed this by now, but let me say it explicitly. I think one of the fundamental problems with Mayor de Blasio is he thinks everything's political, right? He puts politics ahead of people. My role model to be mayor is Fiorello LaGuardia. He used to say there's no Republican or Democratic way to take out the trash. We need a mayor who understands not everything is political, right? And we should actually be building bridges, partnerships between charter and traditional schools to share curriculum, share lessons. And I think that's possible at this moment if we have a mayor who de-escalates the politics and focuses on the kids. So that's my view about charters. Look, I'm someone who cares deeply about racial equity. I led the strategy for President Obama that made sure everyone could live where they choose. Folks may remember when Donald Trump still had a Twitter account, he was attacking Joe Biden for trying to destroy the suburbs because he wanted to make sure people could choose wherever they live, including Black and brown people. So I'm deeply committed to making our schools both higher quality and more racially integrated and closing the achievement gap. But I think the problem is we've basically done that by pitting schools against each other, by pitting parents against each other. And rather than just pushing people towards integration, I think there are ways that we pull them toward that. What does that mean? We have a ton of highly successful, both highly integrated and highly academically successful schools in this city. We should grow them. We should create more of them. There are schools like arts and STEM-based schools, dual language schools. There's so many models. I often say there's nothing wrong with New York that can't be solved by what's right with New York. And we should build on trust, build alliances for these kind of great schools, and find ways to really move together in partnership with parents and communities. And we're doing that in Park Slope. There are a bunch of districts that have started to do that and have really succeeded without pitting parents and schools against each other.
That's great. I think we are running out of time. Bess, do you have a last question there, or?
I do not. I mean, we've asked, I don't have any more questions. We are kind of 5 minutes over, but.
Having too much fun.
All right. Well, Shaun, as Bess said before, thank you so much for coming. Your energy is incredible. Your resume speaks for itself. And we love your experience. And I'm glad that our agents all got a chance to hear from you today. We have recorded this so we could share it with other people. And we hope as things move forward, if we need you to come back, you could come back and maybe have a little more time to answer everybody's questions.
Thank you so much. And I would just say, over my left shoulder, ShaunForNYC.com. Please visit. Would love your financial support, your volunteering. And I would just say, I fundamentally believe that I wouldn't trade my place in this race with anyone. What New Yorkers want is two things. They want change. They want change from the current status quo, but they also want experience. And there's no one else in the race who's not a current elected official or worked for Mayor de Blasio, but also has deep experience the way I do. And that's what we're seeing in all our polling. Support me, please. We can use your help, and would love to catch up with any of you. Go to ShaunForNYC.com.
Thank
Awesome.
you, Shaun.
Thank you again,
so
Shaun.
much.
And thank you, everybody, for putting your time into this today and learning so much about what Shaun and Andrew are here to help do for our great city. Thank you, everybody.
Stay safe, everybody. Thanks. Bye, Pam. Bye,
Thank
Shaun.
you, Bess.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, Bess. Thank you, Pam.
Bye.